Hello, everyone. This is Ari from Invictus along with Jason, and we are super excited for this podcast that we have with you, the Invictus Podcast. We are joined by Major Jake King of the Marietta Police Department. And you've been living under a rock if you don't know about what happened in his department and making Jiu Jitsu mandatory. We have a ton of questions for Jake, and we're excited for you to be here, man. So thanks.
Absolutely, man. Excited to be here with you guys.
Okay, so Jake, we're going to start off. So obviously the majority of our viewership knows that in Marietta, you were able to get Jiu Jitsu as mandatory for your department and officers are training. And obviously the Invictus movement, we've been trying to push that narrative. And outside the Invictus movement, cops who do Jiu Jitsu are still pushing it. So as a general question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult was it to get your department on board with the whole Jiu-Jitsu thing?
Initially, when I spoke about it, it was very difficult because thinking from a command staff level, even being a member of them, nobody had ever done anything like this before. And most people say, well, we've never needed it before. Why? We don't need that training. And most people, or at least in our department, the defensive tactics training had a bad stigma. Just because over the years people didn't want to go or they got hurt, because you were trying to train 8 hours in one day to people that have never seen the inside of a gym, in a decade. So timing is everything. And so we had that bad IHOP incident where we were punching the guy on the ground. And that's when I came in. I said, you do realize if they were trained in jiu-jitsu, none of that would have ever happened. Mm-hmm. And showing them there and asking for a test run, about let me just try it. What can it hurt? We're already embarrassed, in social media and out there on YouTube with this video that is now over 2 years old. How can we change this or prevent this from happening? And that was the angle that I took.
Okay. So let's get some background on your department. How many people in your department?
145 sworn.
Okay. And how long ago did your jiu-jitsu journey start?
My personal jiu-jitsu journey started 3.5 years ago. So it was before this, and it was some friends that talked me to showing up to it. I'd never done martial arts before, and then realized I should have been doing this for the past 23 years of my career, and that this is what officers learn versus I can control somebody. Because a lot of police officers will think they know how to grapple with people on the ground, and you show up to your first rolling session, after you've been training a little bit, and you realize very, very quickly you have no idea what you're doing.
Right. And so what were the excuses that you had in your mind that prevented you from starting jiu-jitsu?
More like I was more nervous about it. I thought I would be embarrassed. And like, I don't have any problem saying this to everybody we hired and telling them, like, the very first class I went to was a class that no other officers attended, because there was about 4 total that attended prior to me, and we're talking about it. And so I was in a class that I knew they wouldn't be at so that I wouldn't be embarrassed in front of them. And then my exact quote that I tell our mandatory officers today, it's the most respectful thing I've ever done in my life. Mm-hmm. Like inside that gym, the respect you're treated with, I said, it's like a family and they treat you like family. And I found that in the jiu-jitsu community, that seems to be the norm everywhere you go.
Okay. So I'm going to throw a question at you by one of our members, Warren. So he wanted to know, how did you convince the county board, the city councilors, the senators, or whoever you talked to, or the governing body, to allow BJJ, considering the quote unquote aggressive nature that the masses want to get away from? How did you do it? How did you handle it? Where's the training start? Is it in your department, the academy, that type of thing?
So it's real easy when you say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu translate as the gentle art. Now, I've seen the meme and I think it's hilarious. It's the gentle art of folding clothes while people are still wearing them.
Yeah.
Love that one, because I'm like, that's a very true statement. And you're telling them, look, if you take all these martial arts, if you take kickboxing and boxing and Krav Maga and real Muay Thai, they teach punch and kicks, versus jiu-jitsu teaches to defend punching and kicking. Now, I do understand in the original Brazilian jiu-jitsu, there were some striking that went into there, more distractions and things like that. But that the gentle art of Brazilian jiu-jitsu teaches how to defend punches and kicks, grapple, and take down to the ground to control people. So showing them the gentle art that it is, that did very, very well. And then it didn't take very long for us to get body cam footage of officers that had been through the mandatory program and were still training, that just fights. I mean, it's more than you've seen out there already. I have tons of videos that just show these young officers dominating fights, calm, cool, and collected. And when I show like the senators now or anybody, and I show them a video, I ask them not what you saw. I said, what didn't you see in this video that you normally see in police violence videos or police interaction videos? And they'll say, I don't hear anybody screaming other than maybe the suspect. And no, there's not any cussing that goes into that. I didn't see anybody punch anybody. And so it's gotten easier and easier. And that's why I'm trying to map this out to show people what jiu-jitsu really is and why all law enforcement should be trained in it.
So Jason and I always talk about this. It's like, where do you start the officers? Is it the 20-year veteran you're working on? So what's your process?
So we start with the mandatory program is the very first day. So the very first day you get hired and you are a Marietta police officer, you haven't even been to the academy yet, you come see me. And I explain it all to you. I have videos that I show you. I give you information. I mean, everything from clipping your toenails and wearing sandals to the gym, to here's your gi. So we issue them gis because it's mandatory. You can't force them to go if it's, without issuing them the gi. That's where it starts. So they are required to go. It's 5 months that they're required. We pay them to go. We pay their membership. They're covered under workman's comp while they're there. They can go on duty and they can go off duty. That's where it starts. So that was the test run. So I went to our command staff to kind of back up to your first question and said, just let me do a 5-month test run with a group. Just let me do a 5-month test run and let's just see what happens. That 5-month test run went so well. That's where we ended up today because it was so successful because that number one word that you heard me say before that they came out with was confidence. And it's not confidence in their badge or confidence, false confidence, real confidence, that comes out. So I asked this, and this may even answer your question, or I think it was Warren's question even better. I was speaking to a group of chiefs, and I asked this question. I said, how many of you have hired somebody in the last year that has never been in a fight in their entire life? You think everybody raises their hand, like we've hired people. I said, okay, so you hire this guy or girl, and you put them through the academy. In Georgia, there's no sparring in Georgia academies. You get 32 hours of defensive tactics training, and that's it, and it's terrible training. And then you go out on the road and there's no sparring or training. And the first time that person's involved in a fight is when their life depended on it. What do you think their reaction is going to be? Mm-hmm. It's what we see. It's a fight where it's out of control and it's chaos. So asking your administrators or your chiefs or your command staff or whatever you call them, that question, you say, well, then we're really doing them an injustice by not giving them this training.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to hand it over to Jason in 1 second here, but I have one question before I do that. Before you started the training, what kind of material did you use to present to the chiefs and stuff like that? How did you do your data collection?
So before the training, we didn't have any data collection. I went off of the embarrassment of the department over the IHOP incident, saying, this looks terrible. 4 officers couldn't control one person on the ground. I can tell you how to stop this from happening in the future. A lawsuit's going to come out of this. We're going to have issues with this. I can prevent this from happening in the future. That's where it started because I didn't have any data. And of course, I was nervous, like especially about injuries and such, right? Because in our defensive tactics training, somebody all injured. And I tell you this now that we're well over 3,000 classes with only the one injury because I fully expected somebody to walk in the jiu-jitsu gym and trip over the mat and blow out their knee, and be like, well, there went that, now we're paying to fix this. And we haven't had that issue, plus, good instruction has a whole lot to do with that.
Cool.
Well, let me ask you a question. What has been the response of officers in your department? Because we've not quite to the level you guys have done it, but I was able to implement in our department that it's mandatory. We do jiu-jitsu based defensive tactics, which I run. And it's mandatory for all officers to go through it every month. But let me ask you, what has been your response from officers that have been told this is mandatory, this is part of working here at Marietta Police Department?
So the new officers, it's nice because they're recruits. You can make recruits do anything, from like saying earlier, like wash cars and windows and stuff like that. So they just look at you and say, okay. And, and you tell them you have to go a minimum of 1 time a week. You can go many times as you want. Mm-hmm. So for the older officers, that is not mandatory for them. So it's not for every single officer in the department. There's a little bit that don't attend, and they said they just don't want to. Because it is hard to go back and say, look, you've been here for 25 years, 30 years, I'm going to make you do jujitsu. So there's about, out of our 145, there's probably less than a third, I would say around 30 to 40 that have never done the jujitsu, and we're not going to force them to do it.
You're folding all the new recruits into the program.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And so what happens is, now that we're 2 years into it, we hire a lot of people, right? Like most law enforcement agencies, I have 2 years of officers that have been through the mandatory program, and the vast majority of them stay in the volume. So what ended up happening after the mandatory is that we then opened it up to the whole department. Anybody that wants to train, you can come and train and start. For them, since it's voluntary, we don't provide gis. They have to buy their own gi. However, we still pay their dues, their membership fee, and everything. And really, departments don't like memberships. So I would encourage people that want to try this, don't walk in and say, I want to buy 145 memberships to a jiu-jitsu gym, because most governments are going to be like, we don't do memberships like that. We worked out a walk-in, your drop-in rates that you have. We just worked out a very simple flat rate. Every time an officer walks through the door, this is how much it costs. So at the end of the month, they send me the sheets that they signed in on, and I can look and say, okay, we had 275 classes this month. This is how much it costs to train. Very simple, to the point. And that's where, your city council and your county commissioners can say, only paying for what we use for. So it's done well. I can tell you, out of people that just flat out said they weren't going to train, it's about 5 or 6 people. Everybody else has either said they will, or they have trained, and they come and go in and out. And we had guys that, that were in their 50s that said, okay, well, now that you're covering me under workman's comp, because that seems to be a big reason not to, I will attend. And when we had guys lose 25 pounds, I mean, there's a whole other part to this, to jiu-jitsu, that hadn't seen the inside of a gym in a decade, but they came to jiu-jitsu training, started it, and lost a bunch of weight, and let alone the resiliency and the mental health part of it for everybody.
That's fantastic. I'm trying to think of it. So with the fitness lifestyle, so I think it's interesting that you guys are covering them under workers' comp and all that stuff. That's really awesome that you guys have been able to get that covered. So when it comes to gyms, do you have a list of like approved gyms that are law enforcement friendly, obviously? And then who teaches your program, like at your department when they're coming in on duty? Who's running that program? Do you have someone from the outside or one of you guys?
No, it's all of our DT instructors, including myself. I'm one of the newest DT instructors to it, because I hadn't done it before. All train in the jiu-jitsu gym, and we only have one. So we're fortunate enough that at 145 people, our one gym can manage us. With all of he offers 11 classes a week, and so the one gym can manage us. We were able to piggyback off him already being a post-certified instructor, because like for workers' comp, and I explain, like, people try to make it way too difficult versus just saying all they're doing is taking defensive tactics training. That's it. It's DT training. It's post-certified. We call it post. Each state will call it something different. But because he's an expert in his field, and I say this, like, think of Alert out of Texas State University, that they teach active shooter. When they come in and teach your department, you get training credit for that. But those guys were not instructors from Arizona or wherever they were from. It's because they're experts in their field. The same thing like Franklin Covey or Dale Carnegie coming in to teach something to you. Gil Martin, out of LAPD, SO there, or there's California Highway Patrol. He's an expert in his field, so you still get credit for it. So by deeming your jiu-jitsu instructor an expert in his field, you can either get them a post number so that they can be an instructor, or you as a defensive tactics instructor sign off on their curriculum, and then they still get credit. So when it goes over to workers' comp, it doesn't, because we had that one broken nose, shockingly, it surprises me. They weren't doing anything special outside of law enforcement. They were just doing defensive tactics training, and they got hurt. It just keeps it very, very, very simple.
So with your jiu-jitsu, is it just straight jiu-jitsu, or are they actually implementing police style use of force issues inside the jiu-jitsu training?
So we're fortunate enough that our coach on his own, I mean, that's what I said, he was doing it way before us. He went and learned with the county police department. Yes, we use blue guns and we have handcuffs, training handcuffs and stuff like there. So we get a mixture of it. And so he basically has taken the fundamentals program, people call it different things, but the basics. And those classes are geared towards defense and police. So like, I know every Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturday mornings are geared towards police officers. Now the public can still come in because if they're just going to learn, headlock defense or side control or mount escape, they're learning those things, but it is geared more towards law enforcement in those classes. And at times the blue guns come out with the holsters and the handcuffs, and he shows more things that our DT instructors also teach. So our department training dovetails perfectly with their jiu-jitsu training.
So Jake, who are you talking about? Your coach, who is this?
Humberto Borges.
Okay.
He goes by Beto. So it's Borges Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah.
And Beto's been teaching cops for several years, hasn't he?
Oh, over 10 years now total. So
Yeah.
like it started way before I ever even knew. And he actually started with another agency, our county agency there. And he did it all for free for a decade. Like because he was so passionate about it, and man, has such a love for law enforcement. And he was born and raised in Brazil, came here, man, got his citizenship, and just opened up this gym. It's like, I just want cops to come train here. It's a cops to come train here.
Yeah.
Because of his passion. And then, you see kind of the fast forward in time and where we are today.
So you already kind of covered, so Lance had a question. You covered some of this, but I'm going to read it out anyway, because we might not have covered some of the stuff. But we're talking about handling liability for officers, paid while training. Is there any liability? Obviously, you said that there's workers' comp and stuff like that, which is amazing. And how do you guys schedule and track new hires for their training? Is it like a typical, like they have their sheet type of thing? And the other issue he's wants to know about his union issues with requiring new hires to train for quote unquote 2 years. Were there any union headaches that you ran into during this?
All right. So the good and bad about Georgia is Georgia police unions are illegal in our state. We cannot have unions. Okay. So I have dealt with unions. So the biggest union I dealt with, not with jiu-jitsu, but in general for active shooter, was in Chicago through their fire department, getting active shooter training put into there through alert. There is a way, unions will definitely push back. And that's one of those things, you got to have the right person in the union that will help you get there. I think that's, seen it that way. So I can't give a whole lot of advice into there. I can talk about the scheduling for the recruits. So one of the command staff they'll push back and say, well, just tell our defensive tactics instructors to teach more. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work. It's not fair to have your DT instructors to teach every Saturday morning. And it's like open range. When I tell them, how many people show up to your open range? It's like 3. Yeah. And those aren't the ones that need to shoot. It isn't. It's the same thing with defensive tactics. If they teach this, they're not going to show up to it. Having that expert in an outside gym gives you several things. One, well, thank the Lord, he's an expert in his field. He knows jiu-jitsu and how to control people to teach. And then 2, our gym offers 11 classes a week. So like our recruits, for scheduling them, it's mandatory for them to go once a week, but they can go up to many times as they want. We don't have any limit on how they go. So there's a class every day at noon, and then there's a class every evening at 6. So even when they're going to the academy and getting done around 5 o'clock, they go straight to the jiu-jitsu gym required, and those classes on Saturday morning. So your night shift guys can go to the evening time classes, then roll right into work. Your day shift guys, like a lot of our special units, there's a class every day at noon. Like I said, they'll go take their lunch and just go work. They'll go train, because obviously nobody's going to eat a lot before or after they train. That just does not work out very well. And so there's a lot of flexibility there by contracting with another gym. So telling your defensive tactics instructors to teach more is not fair, and it's just not going to work. Contracting with a gym that has a real flexible schedule and a lot of classes offered works out well for the officers.
So you only have one jiu-jitsu gym you guys use? Like if there's another gym that someone trains at already and
Yep.
they come to your department, what would that guy say? Would you tell him, well, you have to leave that gym to train at this gym, or how would you handle that?
That has come up, and my only response is like, I'd prefer you train in our gym with our folks. However, if it's a legit gym and we're coming up with a checklist and the way to, that this gym is approved, because obviously for some other things we'll talk about later, not all jiu-jitsu gyms are created equal. We're not going around and taking them. But if we've had somebody come in and said, hey, look, I trained in this gym and it was local to us. And I just said, look, if you can get his curriculum post-approved like we did for Beto, so that you're getting post-credit and they agree to the walk-in rate, you can go train there. Have no problems with that, because we vetted the gym ahead of time. I knew the gym and had taken like SWAT classes there before when he offered free seminars, and knew the guy. I said, I don't have any problem with you training here because it's a good curriculum. but you post a proof that workers' comp will cover it. So it's DT training, not just you going to a jiu-jitsu gym. But then we've had people come in that say, well, I want to keep training in my MMA gym that teaches this, this, and this. And we're like, sorry, we focus on Brazilian jiu-jitsu for a reason. I understand an MMA gym or this type of gym, it's a big part of it, but it's not what we're going to be able to pay to teach, kickboxing and stuff like that. I get it. And I hope you continue to go and enjoy that, but we're going to focus in Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
I think one of the reasons you got a lot of traction in this too is because you guys put out actually statistics, and a lot of administrators love looking at stats. And so when Jay and we put out the articles a couple years ago, we had stats in it, but it really has a lot of weight when Marietta is like, look at the injury rate that's gone down and all these things like that. So it was nice to see that what we already knew in our articles, you guys actually put out as well. And I'm just like, this is fantastic.
Yeah, and I read those articles, especially when I first started, all the way to why people aren't, that's spot on. I mean, because they'll make up every excuse they can, but workers' comp is one of the biggest excuses. And we were able to get over that hurdle. Like if you do get hurt, you are going to be covered. But then your stats, we showed through our research that if you fought a jiu-jitsu officer, you were 31% likely to go to the hospital to be medically cleared if you were injured. If you fought one of our non-jiu-jitsu officers, for whatever reason, I use the term fought, but resisted arrest, you went 65% of the time. It was just more than double the amount, which I remembered reading that in your studies saying that's an amazing number. Well, then we saw that we reduced our injuries to our officers by 48%, which was just another part, so we could show workers' comp savings. And we saved, now is probably like $70,000, $80,000. And we haven't spent $70,000, $80,000 in jiu-jitsu training. Like it's a really, really good scale that goes along with it. We continue to push. And then one of the newest stats, and this is most interesting to me. So the 18 months prior to us making jiu-jitsu mandatory, the night shift guys and girls were responsible for 44% of use of force, right? They work at night, 11 at night till 7 in the morning. For us, they're gonna take the bulk of use of forces just for what they're doing. After making it mandatory, and where do new officers go? They go to night watch. Well, now that all of night watch are jiu-jitsu officers, just by default, that's reduced to 18% of use of forces.
Wow. They
are no longer responsible for the most use of forces, which I was just like, man, that's amazing. They went from almost half of all of our use of force now down to less than 20% forces. Because you talk to those officers, they're like, yeah, because most of the time we don't need to, hands-on will take care of this. And they're confident going hands-on. And that's what I said, even more than what you've seen now. I just have tons of videos showing our guys doing, single legs and takedowns and finishing people with Kimuras into handcuffing. And you're like, this is beautiful, man. It's like making me cry a little bit,
So I'm going to ask, how's the surrounding agencies? Are they buying in? How's that happening?
So being all of the agencies around, especially around us, because we have, we're so close to each other, that they're not necessarily all going to Beto's gym, but they're finding gyms in their jurisdiction and doing it that way. But in our gym, there's probably 6 different agencies training in our gym. Georgia State Patrol, some of the other cities, the county officers are now coming to this gym to train together, especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays. When you walk in and, for our size gym, it will be 20 cops in there training, all either on duty or off duty, whatever it is. But we're the only ones, they're always like, maybe we should work for Marietta, not for some reason, but other reasons, because I'd be paid to be here versus I have to pay my membership. But, Beto gives them a break like a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms do. And, remember they're training together.
So Jake, how did you actually get the funding? Is it coming from the department, from the state? Like who's funding this?
So we use asset forfeiture money. So we use drug seizure money because remember, it's post-approved training. You can use drug seizure money for training. You can't use it for salaries and such, but you can use it for police training. Awesome. As of July 1st, it will no longer be, because we made it a line item in our budget and we're just paying for it out of budget for us because of the success. And like our department, even my chief wrote an article about 3 weeks ago that he's trying to get published on the chief's perspective of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so, man, it's here to stay with us. It's become, and what I think we're going for, and it has happened in our department, is become a culture. Like it really is the culture of our department that you see Well, I mean, somewhere around, it varies by month to month, but you see somewhere between 70 and 80 officers a month walking in the door voluntarily to train in jiu-jitsu because it's because.
So what did you guys use prior to BJJ training? Was it just a standard use of force, pressure control tactics, that stuff?
Yes, it was wrist locks and arm bars. Now, there were some guys, like we talked about Clay Culpepper and a few other defensive tactics instructors that really advanced it. And because they knew some jiu-jitsu, like they were both probably newer blue belts at that time, years ago, they were trying to do better, but the department still, people didn't buy into it because they're just like, this is still the same defensive tactics training. Because at one point, I remember DD training and it was like, here, grab my arm. No, the other arm. No, with your other arm. And it's just like, dude, this is ridiculous, man. And then you kind of figure out 8 hours of DT training in one day is tough on anybody. And that's where all of our injuries were coming. It's like you take this guy or girl and try to get them to train for 8 hours, they're going to get injured, if they're not up to it.
It becomes counterproductive at that point.
It does.
You're completely wearing that person out. Yeah. They're done after 2 or 3 hours of that.
Yep. They're complete, especially that type of training. You're like, okay, I know from working the road, if I grab his wrist and try to push his arm, the back of his tricep, that doesn't work. Because I've got
what's funny? What's funny about that is when I started training guys at my department, we would make it an 8-hour day, but I told, I was telling my captain at the time, I was like, we're not going 8 hours. Like that's too much for what we're doing. It's going to break it down. We're going to long lunch and there's going to be I have to break it down, but they're not going to be 8 hours in that classroom. I had to let him say, hey, give him the full day because a little bit of recovery is going to be needed because we push them. It's not just an hour of class. It's, we're going 4 or 5+ hours in that total training time in that day with a break. And they had at first there's a little pushback on that. It's like, they're not sitting in a classroom. Like they're putting in hard work. And once he kind of saw it and like they come in the next day really sore from the training, he kind of understood like, okay, they get a full 8 hours for that. That's worth it. So
it is, man. The mind can only take so much in a day. And that's what's really nice. I don't know if you guys ever heard this, and I took it from a friend of mine, wherever he got it from. He goes, a lot of training very little is terrible versus a little training a lot.
Chad Lyman says that.
Chad Lyman.
Oh, is it? Is it?
I do know. Unless he got it from somebody else. He says that.
He may have gotten it. Who knows? Well, I'll ask him if he got it from Chad Lyman.
He's an old guy.
I totally agree with Chad, and haven't had the privilege to speak to him yet, but would like to at some point because he's definitely does. But that's where it goes back to, man. Your mind can only take so much. Of these hour-long or hour and 20-minute jiu-jitsu classes that you take, you can retain that 1 or 2 moves that you learned, and then think about it. And then it later. It works really, really well. So, man, hats off to you for your command staff seeing that.
I think one I heard that I always liked, and I think it kind of works all the way around, is the mind can only absorb what the ass can endure. And I always felt like I think it kind of works all the way around.
Well, I think we should give Chad credit for that one as well. So definitely, I mean, he's
got a lot of, he's got a lot of good little colloquialisms. Is that the correct term?
Yeah.
He uses. So that's a big word for me. I hope I got that right.
So Jake, I know a lot of people are watching this are like, okay, so they had it implemented, they did all these things. What is your advice to a cop who's in a department, who's a DT instructor type of thing, and they want to start initiating stuff? How would you suggest that they go about this?
So if they're really getting pushed back, start with the recruits and the new hires. Start there, because most of your command staffs are going to be like, that's fine. If you want to make them go to training, it doesn't affect me. You're not making, the veteran officers go. Just start there. And usually, like most of the time, like I did, I said, just give me 5 months. Just let me try it out for 5 months and let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. Start there, because those officers aren't of value to your agency yet. They'll be in the future, but they're not trained yet. So what does it hurt for them to go and get this extra training and then see how they perform later? And then a byproduct of this, like we've seen some crazy things happen with recruits in jiu-jitsu training. Like we had one guy, literally, he said he couldn't go to jiu-jitsu training. And I was like, why not? And he goes, well, because I have IBS and I'm afraid I'm going to have a flare up while I'm there. And I was like, man, I was like, okay, if you're nervous here and this is your problem, what do you think is going to happen out there working on the road? So there is a whole nother part to this that you learn a lot about your recruits. Because when I explain it to them, I see some that they're shaking their head. They're like, yeah. And I see others, they're like, oh no, I do not want to do this.
Did y'all make
And
him
you
come
get
in with a doctor's note?
I've had that happen before. And I was like, nope, because if you can't do jujitsu, you can't police. I'm sorry,
Exactly.
those are part of it. And I've had that happen before, but you learn a lot about your recruits. And then you have that conversation with them like, look, all your nervousness and apprehension about this needs to be here on this mat in a friendly environment. Get it out here. Nobody's going to hurt you in here. Get it out here. And I can tell you the ones we've had issues with, they don't work for us anymore. They didn't make it. Like I can darn near predict it. Seeing them on the mats learning like that guy or girl is not going to make it.
That's almost another filter for getting new recruits. That's a positive filter that helps you with getting good officers in your department. It's almost although it's hard hiring people nowadays. I don't know how it is down there in Texas. It's been really difficult finding good recruits. It's very difficult. And almost don't want to filter out somebody, but that's a really good one just because we can't have people on the street that are afraid to engage. And I think, unfortunately, in law enforcement, at least from what I've seen over the last 20 years, is we now have officers who are absolutely afraid to physically engage with subjects on the street it could be reasons of they aren't confident in their skills to they're worried about what's going to be the blowback if it goes bad. I think it's more times than not, they're not confident in their skills is usually what I see.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. And something that I hadn't even put this out. So I was looking back through, which we've had a difficult time. Here's another plug for people trying to pitch it from the administration. We've had 4 people come to us and get hired by us because we do jujitsu. And they came to us with like blue belts and they're like, man, that department does jujitsu. I want to work there. And then the other part of that is I was looking through every recruit or officer that we've lost in the last 3 years. And 4 of them, because we write down the reason why, 4 of them before we started the mandatory program specifically quoted they were scared and didn't want to continue in the job. Since we've done the mandatory program now, to April 1st will be 2 the mandatory part. We've had 0 quit because they were scared. I mean, that right there, I can tell you, man, we reduced it to nothing. At least that's not what they're saying, versus 4 people beforehand literally said they were scared.
Well, it does what we know officers need. It builds confidence. It builds physical strength and stamina. It's a very important part of what we do as police officers. And, jiu-jitsu fills a lot of roles besides just giving you the actual skill set to handle people on the street in a safer manner as possible. It gives you a lot of bonuses. This stuff we know. If we train, we know this. This is why we push it so much. We're like, guys, cops need to be training for like every reason you can think of. And it's good. I'm so glad you guys came out with that study and are pushing it because it's really, it's been huge. That study came out and that was huge. I've seen that make a huge impact in a lot of areas already.
Yeah. I was telling Ari, I said, man, I talk to hundreds of agencies a week now, which before it was maybe like 10, 12. I've even helped Singapore set up a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program. They sent me a nice little challenge, man. Nice. I sent them a bunch of information, talked to them in Singapore. I mean, France, Canada, you name it, man. And it's just like, because it's people that do training to, they're like, that's what I'm saying. This will make a difference. Yeah. So now this guy, in between your studies, which I read, like I said, and the actual thing, hey, man, I can prove it to you. Like I can prove it to you in the numbers that this actually makes a difference. And I said this, I think before we started recording, I was talking to Ari, I was like, police reform is coming. Like it's coming in one way or another. And they're going to put millions of dollars behind a crappy PowerPoint or some video we have to watch that will do anything for us. And that's what pushing.
You're right. I was about to say you're 100% on point with that, what you just said. And it's going to be very important for those of us here, like in this community, in this jiu-jitsu cop community, who are like, hey, this is where it needs to go. And we have to be very picky about what we allow inside of our departments as far as what's training, because we haven't been picky before. We've allowed these, I don't know, every department's picked some weird type of martial art or defensive tactics thing that is completely ineffective. We all know it because, you're learning like Aikido wrist locks. No offense to Aikido, but like if you're not Steven Seagal, like that Aikido wrist lock is not going to work when you're dealing with a violent subject on the street. It just doesn't. Or whatever, whatever PPCT, whatever freaking whatever we're using, it's always been super ineffective, and nothing other than, from what I've ever seen, other than jiu-jitsu and grappling has been effective in teaching cops defensive tactics. So we got to make sure we're real picky, because there's going to be a lot of people, I think, that try to jump on this bandwagon for the money. And that's something that, yes, the people who teach this at a high level should be compensated for the work that they put into it, but we got to be picky. We can't just it's going to be like, you can imagine, we've seen some bad videos of cops being taught defensive tactics. Ari, we had a friend of ours just north of Austin here who sent us a video of some really shady defensive tactics being taught. And there's people that are going to form a company and make themselves look good, but they don't have the background to be teaching police officers defensive tactics. So I think it's real important. Yes, the money's coming, and it's going to come all the way probably from the federal government at some point. And there's going to be a lot of people with their hand out saying, I know the answer. I have the answer. And I personally think we need to make sure we're sticking with police officers, typically, who are well-trained. Because right now, by this point, we have a lot of cops who are well-trained in jiu-jitsu, a lot of cops who are black belts running around, a lot of cops putting out good programs. And I think we need to make sure we're funneling the people who understand the true use of force issues that we deal with when it comes to teaching defensive tactics. And I don't think anybody can know it like a cop can know that.
Yeah.
Until you've been on the street and you've dealt with the situations where all the whole circle of use of force is involved, unless you understand the implications of all that stuff, I don't think you should really be teaching cops too much without supervision, in my opinion.
So Jake, I'm going to throw two questions at you. One from Takeshi from New York, and he says, are you guys taking lateral transfers?
Yeah. So come on, because especially from New York, you poor guys, man, you just got obliterated with that. Man, it's terrible.
Yeah. And so the second one I have is, you're going to make a commercial right now. So a chief comes to you and goes, Major King, I want to know why I should put jiu-jitsu in my department. Throw some numbers at me. Why is jiu-jitsu beneficial? Why can't we just use the baton like it used to work? So do your plug.
Okay. Yeah. So Chief, like I mentioned before, you've hired people in the last year that have never been in a fight. And the first time they're involved in a fight is when they're out on the street fighting for their life. So you're going to get that adverse reaction, that screaming, that punching, that kicking that we don't like to see. The culture of America has changed completely. It is no longer accepted for us to, and I'm going to use this term, and it's an aggressive term, beat people into submission. We have done that our entire law enforcement career. If it went from back in the day before me, when it was slapjacks to PR-24s to ass batons, to even the use of tasers, which are fine, they work really, really well, and there's a spot for them, but we beat people into submission. That's not acceptable anymore in our country. We have to have a more professional way. And you like to see the professional when you see officers politely control people and dominate fights and take them down to the ground and arrest them. But you're not giving them any tools or education or training to do that with. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a proven way to train your officers to give him or her one of the most important things they need: confidence with real skills. A lot of people go into this job with confidence, but they don't have the real skills. And as soon as they are challenged and they realize they don't have the skills, that's when we see tragedy happen in our country.
Awesome. Love it.
All right, for on the spot, I was like the best I got.
That was fantastic.
Pretty good. Had me sold.
So the question is do you guys have a gym there that's big enough to host an Invictus event in Georgia?
Yes, actually, our county PD, who is obviously in this lockstep with us and does a great job, they could handle that for sure. And I really like what you're saying with that.
You would be our guest, and we would love to do it. So, I mean, Jason and I, obviously the whole COVID thing has been crazy and stuff. And as the restrictions lighten, we're going to, we want to get other places. In April, down in Jay's gym right there is it's gonna happen.
I can just get you out of that communist country you're living in, Ari.
I'm doing my best, man.
Without this insane restrictions and requirements to get back into your country, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. There's a bunch of places like that. Georgia's not one of them. Georgia's opened everything back up for the most part.
Neither is Texas.
Yeah, good old Texas.
So, Ari, if you want to come down here, and Austin's hiring. I mean, put in your app.
Yeah, I got it.
I'm saying, Austin is hiring. I'm here. It's Texas.
I know. there's things I want to say, but I'm not going to say. So
I'm just saying, open it up.
So
you have friends here, Ari.
I know. So Jake, I guess we're super impressed on what you've done, and I'll be really honest, really thankful that you just kept pushing and got this information out and got your department on board. Marietta is now synonymous with BJJ mandatory training, which is amazing. It's like, I can't even express how cool it is. And now people are looking at your department and asking questions. You're doing all these interviews, and whether you like it or not, you are the face of this movement because it's happening, right? And I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass. It's just, it is what it is. You're at the forefront. And so people will have questions and they want to know. So I think it's awesome. Super appreciate it. So let's kind of just chat about, we talked about the whole process, but I want to talk about you and jiu-jitsu, particularly your personal journey, what you're loving about it. Because I know you've been answering all these questions about stats and things like that, but let's just talk about you and what you're getting out of it and favorite moves and what you're working on. And just like, I want to know about that stuff too.
Oh man, it's crazy, man. You're the first person to ask me that. Oh man, obviously I love the process.
Hi, Lindsay. Sorry.
Yeah. Someone's like, hey.
Couldn't help myself.
Yeah, that's my wife in the background there.
Yeah, mine will be walking in here in just a minute.
Yeah.
So I heard the garage door open, so they'll be busting through the door here in a second. But saying the process, love it. And actually, you see right there, I had a black eye from last week that I took it right to the face. And I even said to the guy, I was like, dang it, man, not the face. My wife has said, not the face. So man, I can't even explain like the resiliency factor of it and the mental health part that goes into it, like going into, a gym there. And I'm excited to be here. I got a lot of stress and man, that has been a huge factor for me. And I've heard that with a lot of other officers as well. Some of my favorite moves, oh my gosh, man, I haven't been put on the spot for this. Man, when I do the high side mount or high side control, that's one of my favorite, man. When I have them pinned between.
What's high side control?
Oh, when you sitting on somebody's hip, when they're up on their side and you're sitting on their hip, I know everybody has different terms. So when they're on their side,
side mount.
Yeah, side mount. So high side mount, but side mount is one of my favorite. Man, that is definitely one of my favorites because I have a lot of chokes that I like doing from there, man. And you're sitting down on the.
What's your favorite submission?
Takatami. Takatami. My favorite submission.
Takatami?
I don't even know the Takatami. What is that?
Takatami, the Brazilian. It's an arm triangle when you're flat on your belly. Takatami.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. It is true. You go to different gyms.
There's different terms.
And I say this all the time when I'm teaching. I'm like, so I know it by this name, but there's other, it's called other names.
Yeah.
Because if I go down to 10th Planet and train, I get all the 10th Planet lingo, which
right.
Here we have, I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yep.
Different gyms will say kind of different names for different positions.
Yeah, it's funny because my coach would be like, Takatomi. Like it means because you lay flat on your stomach, to finish it off.
Yeah.
And
head mount triangle. Yeah.
Wherever that term came from, I don't know, man. So, but there's so many things just fascinated by all of it. I always said that to my coach is like, I'm just fascinated on how it works. Like just how everything works. You can go in here and you can be a big, strong guy, girl, and have all this mental grit. And then somebody that's half your size just dominates you up and down the mat. And to me, I'm laughing on the inside as I'm getting whipped around the mat by somebody that's 60 pounds lighter than me. And I'm just like, this is hilarious, and just have such a good time with it. And that, man, and the relationships. And like I said, in the very beginning, and kind of summarize with this, it's the most respectful thing I've ever been a part of, in my life of this. And that just means so much to me, and just, that loyalty and everything that goes along with it and what you learn for sure.
What are you finding right now that you are struggling with in jiu-jitsu? What is your Achilles heel?
Whoa, I am not great at mount submissions. Like I can get to the mount a good bit, but submitting from the mount, I do not do well with. I have a few and I've been practicing on it. I even spoke to my coach about it. I was like, I get to mount pretty frequently, at least, in comparison.
Yeah.
Brown belts and stuff. Nah, I'm not getting to mount with brown belts. It's just not happening. Or black, of course. But once I get there, I struggle with submissions, and I know I'm in a good spot, man. I'm here. I'm in a nice dominant spot, but I struggle with submissions there. So that's my biggest one.
I think that's really normal. Mounts, mount is a tough position. Like everybody thinks, oh, mount's a great position if you're fighting, because then you can just rain down blows. But for jiu-jitsu, mount is a special. Not everybody can. Mount's not my favorite. I have a few that I'm really solid at, but typically when I get to mount, if I don't see the things I want, I'm going to knee back on the knee on belly and working from there because mount's a tricky position.
Yep. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I will go to side mount a lot of the times. I will let them up because I'm better at side mount than I am for mount. So I guess at least I know I'm not the only one.
No, I think it's pretty common. I don't know about you all. That seems common to me. Everybody I've talked to, unless you're Hardger Gracie, your mount position is tough. It's a tough position.
Right. But you think it's supposed to be, and coach will say from here you should be finishing from here, and I'm like, but I'm not. I'm trying. I'm really trying, and it's just not working.
Jake, you'll have that problem through your entire career into black belt that it never goes away.
Oh man!
How big are you? If you don't mind me asking, like how tall?
6'1", 200 pounds.
Oh, you should be crushing people in mount. I take it back. Your coach is right.
Man, that doesn't make me feel good at all.
I'm like 5'7", so I get to mount like half. I've got guys where I can't even get my knees to the ground. I'm like, I'm getting out of this position.
Right.
This ain't working for me.
Like I said, I can get there. It's just finishing it, and I can even maintain it pretty well. But eventually, I'm just like, okay, I'm out of options. I've tried everything I know. I tried everything. It doesn't work.
Hey, Jake, where are the stats or the articles you put out or anything? Like, can people go online and actually find them on the Marietta website or stuff? Like,
so that's actually a really good question. I send all my staff to whoever wants it. So I don't have an official place that you can go because there's new stats. Like there's new things I was telling you that keep coming out all the time. So I send it to anybody. So anybody that emails me or they track me down, I have like a whole packet. So this is probably something really good for your viewers. I have a whole packet of information that I send that I can actually probably just provide it to you guys, and maybe you guys could clear house if you want. I have a sample policy that I've written, a sample proposal. I have my stats. I have both articles that have been written and my chief's article, all in this. Like I send it out in an email as here, you can take it all. I give it to you in Word documents so you can cut and paste everything into your own letterhead, whatever it is you want to do to get along. But I don't have like an official place to post all that stuff. Maybe you guys could help me out with that and I could just provide it to you.
Yeah. So why don't you send it to us and we'll put it on our website and front and center, and people can click on, because people ask about it all the time. Like, are there articles or whatever like that? So we'll do that. We'll put everything that you provide to us on the Invictus website.
Nice. I'll send it to you probably this evening, and that would really help because like I told you, man, I get tracked down by about 100 agencies a week directly. And a lot of them that send me emails, I'm like, hey man, keep going, trying. Here's a bunch of information. Let me know if you need anything else, and just send it. Like I can't, touch everybody. I'm just trying to get it out there as fast as possible. So man, I will have it to you guys here shortly, and then maybe let you guys go from there.
Cool. Any plugs you want to do for, this is your chance to talk about your coach, your department, anything like that. Go ahead, man.
Oh man, I got to plug my coach, Humberto Beto Borges, because by Beto, man, none of this would be possible without him. Because if some of us walked into his gym and had a bad experience, this would have never happened. And he's been doing it now for over 10 years, and he did it for free for years and years and years. And he even had class specific just for cops. He's like, he'll say, because I love the cops. He has that accent. I love the cops. I just want you guys to train here so you can learn and you guys can be better out there on the street. So man, 100% to my coach, Borges BJ, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and he brought it here, which will make it grow for everybody else. And just being a part of that, man, and just get a little choked up just thinking about it, man. When you spend that much time with somebody, you get a little emotional with them, and like him and I work together and we discuss things. And even this, I mean, he knows I'm interviewing with you guys today and talking about it. And he knows all about it. You guys put his gym on your website and he saw it and he was just, smiling ear to ear. And, he's just here to support. And so, man, thank you for that opportunity to promote him.
Yeah, cool. Well, we really appreciate it. And you're doing good things. And it's awesome to have a guy like you in the movement and doing stuff, because as you know, it's not just one person. Jason and I, we say this all the time. It's like, if you have something you want to push, you come to Invictus and we'll help you. But we have to do it as a collective. Otherwise, it's just one voice in a room, a big echo chamber. So,
yeah, no doubt. Well, thank you guys very much for the opportunity for me to be here. And thank you for, just pushing. And man, you guys were leading the pack for all those years. And it's awesome, man, to see where it's going now.
You're doing good stuff, man. Like that thank you for putting the effort in and getting that studies done and getting the stats. Cause I retired a lieutenant. So you got a lot on your plate. And so when you throw that on your plate as well, that's self-initiated. That's pretty awesome. And You're having a huge impact on everything we're all trying to do. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. My chief's real supportive too, man, to give him a shout out. Very supportive and he sees it, and dude, he's been around. He's been policing 40 something years, man.
What's your chief's name?
Dan Flynn, Chief Dan Flynn. Man, he retired from Miami-Dade, then went to Savannah, which is another huge agency, and came to us as his retirement job.
Yeah.
And he's been a great chief. He's been my chief for almost 14 years now.
Nice.
I mean, he's been a chief for a long time just with us, and he supports it. Like, he gets it and understands it. And when we talked about funding and other things, I can tell you some conversations that I've had in the past 2 weeks. There is some federal funding that is most likely coming in massive forms. And that's where I think will be very important, like you were saying, that it's in the right gyms. You can't just give it to John Smith's karate strip mall that then puts BJJ behind their name just so they can get that funding. And we're working on a standard for that. Like, this gym has to meet this standard. So exactly what you're talking about. Cool. But some great conversations have happened because of the explosion. And honestly, the explosion came, from the video that I did with Hunter Gracie. It pushed it out there. I was trying. Mm-hmm. He really pushed that message way out there to where now it's like a lot of people have seen it and are listening. And man, I'm thankful for that as well. For a lot of reasons, thankful, that it's here today, and that. And all of a sudden, ideal, I think everybody in this meeting, if the federal government came down and said, we're going to put $80 million behind Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and law enforcement, and we're going to grant fund agencies to do it, that all of us would be like, now that's a day that's going to change law enforcement.
Yeah.
That will bring real change.
Well, I do think it's coming full circle. I think we had a really hard year last year. We've had a hard, let's be honest, 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
But last year was probably the peak of it, I think. But I think it's going to come full circle with the funding and the recognition that something we all knew, cops just did not have the training to deal with this stuff and weren't receiving it unless they were getting it on their own. And I think now the exposure that, hey, cops really need good training to deal with this stuff if you want to see use of force incidents reduced and less shootings and all these other things. I think it's coming full circle. I think we are going to see a positive impact in the long term with all this negative stuff we had to deal with.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, Jake, we really appreciate it. Great podcast, one of the best we've done. I'm super stoked for it. So again, thank you, Major Jake Shields of the Marietta Police Department, and on behalf of Jason and myself, Ari for Invictus. We'll see you again. Stay safe and keep training.
Oh, you guys too. Take care. Have a good night.
Okay, man.